I'm getting ready to release the new versions, new and improved versions of our first generation Xterra skid plates. I wanted to give you an idea of what changes I've made to make them new and improved, and hopefully get you to understand how they work, how much nicer they are than the originals were, and maybe entice you to buy a set. So let's take a look. On the left-hand side, you can see an original set of our first generation Xterra skid plates. Front skid, engine transmission skid, and the two bolted together. The problem with our front skid here was that you had to have the engine transmission skid in order to use it, because they actually bolted together through that area right there. So one of the things that I wanted to do with our redesign was make it so that this front skid could be used with or without the engine transmission skid. And I apologize that it keeps focusing on my finger as I'm trying to point things out, but yeah, well, that's what it's doing. Anyhow, so with this design, this front skid, A, gives you more clearance than this original front skid did. It can still be used with the tow hook, and we do provide you with some new, longer hardware. This is the original hardware, but since we've added a spacer and the skid plate, here you can see the holes for mounting the skid plate, we'll be providing you with two longer bolts than those two originals that you see there. We've also provided ventilation, that you can see all those holes. These are actually shaped the same as the openings in your grill. And then we've provided this access here that allows you to change the oil filter without needing to remove the skid plate. Now, there is a cover for that. It's not installed on this prototype. There are some changes that you'll see between a production part and these prototypes. For example, these ribs back here, they won't be there on the production part, although this rib up front, there we go, focused again, that rib up front will be there. That rib puts the bottom of the, or rather, puts the skid plate then in contact with the bottom of that front chassis cross member to prevent bends like this one has. Now, granted, this bend is off to the side a little bit, but I've seen them where they were arced more like that after years of use, and you know, try to stiffen it up a bit, try to make it a little nicer. Now, one of the things that made me decide to get rid of the ribs at the back, and actually this gap in the middle on the prototype, was because the oil pan actually sits there, and I messed up a little bit. I thought I could run a rib straight through, and well, I ended up hitting the oil pan by, I don't know, half an inch or something. So I had to remove that section, and then realized that this rear section wasn't needed at all. By adding these catalytic converter guards, you have two layers of 3/16 inch thick steel, which ends up being, you have a 3/8 inch rib on that side of the transmission and another 3/8 inch rib on that side of the transmission. So you've got a lot of strength back there, and I don't think you'll ever have a problem with the skid plate really getting bent in that area. Even on this older one that was used, there wasn't a whole lot of bending there anyways, and we've just strengthened it. So I'd see that as an improvement in the strength of the skid plate, and also now you've got your converters protected both from theft and from rock damage. There's these little tabs here. There's a self-tapping bolt right there, and that will attach to the chassis. And then you can see here that little dip there and right there, that's where your torsion bar passes through, and then the slots allow for airflow and for mud, etc., to drain out of the cat guard so that it isn't accumulating underneath your converter, because of course the converters get very hot, and you know, could, if you allow material to collect there, you can cause a fire. At the very least, you know it's going to smell horrible after you've gone through the mud, and mud is collected in that area. We've dealt with that before. But anyhow, the cat guards do add strength by doubling the thickness of those two sides. So that's an improvement in strength as far as the installation is concerned. On our original, we used these custom-made U-bolts, and they came through these holes right here from below, and after a while you could wear them out. You would rub these against rocks and they would get worn out. Well, problem is these were custom made for this skid plate, so if you needed new ones you had to buy them from us. I mean, that sounds like a great deal for us, but not for you. And yeah, I wanted to get away from those. And while they did work, and we could also do this. We did this for some folks. This little plate here allowed you to run a carriage bolt up through these openings, and then a plate at the top of the cross member, right about here, so that you could attach the front of the skid plate basically to the same area that this did. But it wasn't custom made. It was just carriage bolts. The problem was that our front skid plate right here was still needed to be bolted to the engine transmission skid plate, and that was always a problem because these bolt heads were right at the leading edge of the skid plate system, and they would get sheared off. I think the middle one on this skid plate is sheared off, and so then it's stuck in there. But I wanted to get away from that, and so what I did, so that these two skid plates could be used separately, I created these little brackets right here. So this bolts onto the front of your cross member. There's bolts there already. All you have to do is remove the nut, put this piece on, put the nut back. And what that does is it gives you a mounting point for the front skid plate there, and it gives you a mounting point for the engine transmission skid plate. And what's nice is that by doing it that way, you can use these two skid plates separately. Gives nice solid mounting points for both of them, and it also allows you to just use simple carriage bolts. Oh, those aren't carriage bolts. These are carriage bolts. So it allows you to use a carriage bolt. These are grade 5 carriage bolts that we provide, and you can get them at a local hardware store rather than needing to buy something that's custom made just for this application. And we really wanted to get away from that because it's not to your benefit, and it doesn't make life easy for you at all, and it just wasn't a good solution. So we wanted to get away from that. So these are 3/8 16 carriage bolts, a good bit beefier than the original 5/16 18 bolts that we used. They would have been in these holes through existing holes in the transmission cross member, and this little cutout here was so that you could access the nut on top of this bolt. It was difficult to install, and I didn't like it. So this bolt actually goes up through this hole, or one of these holes here. Automatic transmission, manual transmission, and it goes right through the cross member. You do have to drill through the top surface of the transmission cross member in order for this bolt to go through, but then you just have a nut and a lock washer on top. And if, for example, you damage the head of this bolt by rubbing it over rocks or whatever, and you decide you want to replace it, you can get this locally from any hardware store. And even if this is damaged, you don't ever have to put a wrench on it. You just get a wrench on the nut that's up at the top, and that won't be damaged. So you can more easily remove it, which makes maintenance, or whatever you need to do, makes it a lot easier than our old system where you had these tiny little bolts and nuts and hard to reach, and etc., etc. So we wanted to get away from that. One of the things you don't see here on the prototype is the oil drain hole right there. That is exactly the same as the one that's on this skid plate, but I've actually changed it. So what you'd see on a production part, or if you see the picture that I posted earlier with the solid model of this skid plate, is this hole is now elongated a bit to give you a little more access to draining, to your oil drain, and to allow the draining of the oil to be a little easier for you. So hopefully that gives you a better idea of the differences between the two, and why I think you'll really like these new skid plates. Oh, and yeah, I wanted to say something about the clearance up front here. I forgot. So when you look at the original front skid plate, it goes from the front of the engine transmission skid plate up at an angle to a cross member behind the bumper. That cross member is not removable. It's part of the chassis, so it will be on all Xterras, and so it basically is at a straight angle. And if you look at this one, that's not the case. I actually went at a much steeper angle, and then attached to a cross member, chassis cross member. But on this end, those are the existing holes where the tow hook mounts. And yes, you can still use the tow hook with this front skid plate. Over here, there's 2 existing holes in your frame. We will be providing you with some nut inserts that just get put in there, and we'll provide you with the tool to install it as well. And then you can see how you've gained a whole bunch of approach angle with this skid plate as opposed to the other one, because the other one would have gone from roughly here straight down to here. So we've instead gone up and over, and it really seems to make a big difference on the approach angle as you're coming up to an obstacle. You will not be hitting this skid plate nearly as quickly or as fast or as easily as you would have hit that one. You'll still hit it probably, but anyway. So there you go. There's your little overview of some of the changes and improvements that I've made from the old style first gen Xterra skid plates to the new style. Well, I hope you like what you see with our revised first gen Xterra and Frontier skid plates. And if you need a set for your truck, just go to our website, skidrowoffroad.com, and check them out.